Prison, they say, is a place where justice is upheld, but in El Salvador this is different. Here there's only a thin line between justice and cruelty. At a prison close to the country's capital, inmates are packed in tiny rooms with little openings. At another, they are forced to sleep on metal beds with no mattresses. There is also a place where inmates' only source of water is a well surrounded by heaps of garbage. In this video, you're going to see the different prisons in El Salvador that are built to crush the world's most dangerous gang members. Places where living conditions push inmates beyond human limits, breaking both their minds and bodies. Let's get started. The Terrorism Confinement Center. In the heart of El Salvador sits its newest and largest prison, where gang members who once ruled cities and streets are stripped of their freedom and influence. Recently, CNN reporters visited the facility, and the things they discovered were shocking. In the heavily controlled facility, inmates are subjected to a strict daily routine. Each inmate wears a plain white t-shirt and shorts, with some on socks and sandals. Their heads are shaved, and many have tattoos covering their faces and backs. Although the cells that they occupy are clean and orderly, inmates have only the bare essentials, which are an open toilet, a cement basin, a plastic bucket for washing, and a large jug for drinking water. So privacy and comfort here are simply non-existent. According to the reporters who visited this facility, inmates spend 23.5 hours a day in these confined spaces, with no access to books, games, or letters from their loved ones. The only break from confinement is a 30-minute period where prisoners leave their cells for group activities, and this time is usually spent in the central hallway, either doing exercises or participating in Bible readings. Armed guards, with their faces masked, also maintain constant surveillance throughout the day, ensuring that the strict rules are followed. The meals here are simple and repetitive. Usually, breakfast consists of beans, cheese, or a mix of rice and beans, and their meals are sometimes accompanied with plantains and a cup of coffee. For lunch and dinner, they get either rice or pasta and a beverage, with no meat provided. While speaking on the issue, Belarmino Garcia, the director of SECO, described the prison's mode of operation as an attempt to strip away any privileges that the inmates might have once known, adding that no meat, chicken, or even special menus exist in the prison. Although there is no death penalty in El Salvador, the inhumane treatment given to inmates in this prison shows there is also no intention for these men to ever be released. While the treatment of inmates at the Terrorism Confinement Center seems rather brutal, a similar thing is also happening in yet another El Salvador prison, Zacatecoluca Prison. This is one of El Salvador's biggest prisons and is said to house the country's most dangerous criminals and gang leaders. The facility is famous for its inhumane living conditions, extreme overcrowding, severe security measures, and the presence of high-ranking gang leaders. As a maximum security facility, it houses some of the most dangerous inmates, including leaders from the notorious MS-13 and Barrio 18 gangs. And this simply means one thing: violence is at its peak. Violence within this prison is often fueled by gang rivalries and power struggles, which often leads to frequent clashes between factions. Recently, a human rights organization released a report on how inmates are often strangled and suffocated to death by fellow gang members. Sometimes preventive measures are put in place to curb the violence, and this often involves strict isolation for prisoners who are deemed particularly dangerous or vulnerable to attacks from rivals. A famous example is the influential MS-13 leader Saul Tercios, who was isolated for months due to threats from within his own gang. However, despite efforts to save him, he was eventually killed in his cell. A similar case was that of a 30-year-old man whose lifeless body was given to his relatives with a protrusion on the neck. The medical documents had reported that he died as a result of mechanical asphyxiation by strangling. According to the report, the body also had deep wounds on the elbow, blows on the forearm, and a wound of approximately 8 centimeters on the left side of the head. In another similar case, a 42-year-old died in a police cell. An autopsy determined the cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation by choking. Aside from these reports of strangling and brutality, there are also reports of inhumane treatment, including inadequate food and medical care. Inmates are sometimes denied access to visitors, and this treatment can persist for years. Just like the Zacatecoluca prison, this next facility also houses some of the most dangerous gang members in El Salvador, Ciudad Barrios Prison. Ciudad Barrios Prison in El Salvador is notorious for its dangerous living conditions, which is majorly caused by the activities of the MS-13 gang. The facility exclusively houses MS-13 gang members, many of whom wield significant authority amongst their fellow inmates. Although the Ciudad Barrios Prison was originally built for 800 inmates, it now houses over 2,000, thereby resulting in serious overcrowding. While speaking in a recent interview, a prison inmate, Avila Gomez, revealed how 90 inmates are forced into a cell with a capacity of only 30. 30. Avila Gomez is a Barrio 18 inmate who is struggling in the MS-13-dominated prison. In his statement, Avila noted that in his cell alone, there were 46 of his gang's faction and 44 inmates of the other gang. The inmates themselves have organized their own affair, as each cell has one designated manager per gang. In another section of the jail shared by the MS-13 and Barrio 18, Avila Gomez's counterpart, Francisco Quintero, also claimed that the inmates are trying to live together. He noted that they never expected the living conditions of the prison to be this way, citing the shock that each inmate experienced upon their arrival at the facility. It's said that the prison operates as a self-contained society, where the gang runs internal operations, including a bakery, hospital, and basic rehabilitation services. Guards and military personnel only secure the perimeter, avoiding any interaction with inmates inside. This level of freedom leaves inmates essentially running the facility, thereby strengthening the authority of gang leaders and putting low-ranking gang members at risk. A similar thing seems to be happening in this next prison we're about to explore. Quezaltepec Prison. Located 30 kilometers north of the capital San Salvador, Quezaltepec Prison is known for the deadly riots between rival gang members in the facility. It is also known for the harsh living conditions that inmates are forced to endure, such as severe overcrowding and lack of medical care. For many years, there have been reports of death caused by torture, neglect, and abuse. And many of these cases are still reported, despite court-ordered releases, which have been issued on several occasions. In 2015, at least 14 inmates were killed in the facility after violence erupted between two factions of a notorious gang. The killings were linked to an internal dispute involving the Barrio 18 gang, which eventually led to the killing of inmates. The prison was immediately placed on lockdown and security ramped up. A state of emergency was also declared for 72 hours at the jail. Within a few hours, about 50 people with relatives in the jail arrived at the facility, some weeping and others demanding to know the identities of the dead. According to reports, it all started when prison officials were alerted that some members of the Revolutionaries faction of the gang failed to return to their cells, and upon searching the premises, security agents and riot police found their bodies among some rubbish bins. While speaking on the incident, Eugenio Chicas, who was the communications secretary for the presidency at the time, described the incident as a purge, adding that incidents of that nature could be an act of purification among gang members. Similar to Quezaltepec, this next prison has also reported some of the deadliest prison riots and living conditions ever seen. Izalco Prison. This facility is considered the world's toughest prison and has been constructed specially to house gang members whom the government has decided to keep off the streets for a long time. Although Izalco Prison was designed to house a limited number of inmates, it now holds far more than its capacity, and this is primarily due to the government's aggressive anti-gang crackdown, which has led to cells being packed with prisoners. Recently, news reporters released images of how inmates are packed in cells, often with no space to lie down or move freely. There is also lack of ventilation, poor sanitation, and inadequate access to clean water. One of the most significant issues in Izalco Prison is the lack of medical care for inmates, even those suffering from serious chronic conditions. According to reports, inmates with diseases such as HIV, diabetes, and kidney failure are often denied access to necessary treatments. Some have even died from untreated illnesses, simply because they were not taken to hospitals or given proper medication. Additionally, the food provided at the facility is also nutritionally inadequate, further worsening the health of those with special dietary needs. All of these factors have turned the facility into a dangerous environment for inmates, with numerous deaths linked to poor conditions and lack of proper medical care. While reports from Izalco Prison have been majorly linked to poor living conditions of inmates, something far worse has been reported about this next facility. Mariana Prison. The prison has existed since the 90s and was used as a place of torture for political prisoners. The forms of torture carried out here are particularly gruesome, including using a rubber or plastic hood to induce asphyxiation or give severe beatings. Inmates have previously reported that guards set off gases in their cell blocks, spreading some type of dust that leads to the coughing up of blood after being inhaled. Recently, inmates have described a particular prison guard, Montana, as the torturer of Mariana Prison. Montana, whose real name is William Ernesto Rodriguez, is originally from Turin, Ahuachapan, and according to sources, he began working as a security employee at Izalco Prison in 2006. Montana's name has appeared recurrently in the testimonies of people who were imprisoned under the state of exception. Officials have also affirmed that he has appeared frequently in several inmate statements, with many describing him as a big, stocky man whom everyone is afraid of and who rules in Mariana. According to Ingrid Escobar, an official who has handled cases involving inmates at the prison, at least 3 people have mentioned Montana's name in their testimonies. inmates, and in all 3 stories, he appears as the leader of those who harass inmates in the prison. In these testimonies, it was stated that Montana actively participated in torturing prisoners and would even threaten to kill inmates. A 20-year-old inmate once claimed that Montana warned the inmates that they could only leave the prison alive if they are lucky enough. He also added that inmates were often tortured with electric shocks while on their knees. Another inmate also disclosed that Montana was the one who ordered and commanded inmates in the facility. It's said that he would command other guards to take inmates out of the cell and beat them. The inmates are beaten so badly that when they get back to the cell, they would have to be dragged around, unable to walk for days. While the treatment of inmates at Mariona Prison is particularly heartbreaking, things are less critical at this next prison. Cojutepeque Prison. This prison was built in response to the large number of gang members who were arrested in a crackdown, and as such is densely packed with inmates in very terrible living conditions. Reporters have disclosed how the number of inmates here is about 4 times the original capacity of the prison, causing significant overcrowding. In this prison, gang life is largely inevitable. Inmates often spend most of their time in a dirt-floored space which is just about the size of a basketball court. There they play soccer most of the time, or accommodate family or other visitors when it's visitors' day. For leisure, there is a small television room that has space for only a dozen inmates at a time. Showers are also primitive. Inmates shower by pouring buckets of water from a well that's surrounded by garbage. Some of them even sleep just above one of the toilets. It's safe to say that rehabilitation has taken a backseat at this facility. There is no library or job training programs, only a small workshop where gang members can draw and paint pictures, which they mostly give to their family members during visits. Initially, Mississippi, 13 gang members were housed here, but they were eventually separated from their rivals, the Barrio 18 gang, as a means to slow the fighting between the 2 groups in the prison system. However, what began as an experiment in violence control has unfortunately given the gangs a chance to re-establish their authority and rules. Since there is only one gang here, members are able to enforce the type of discipline that allows them to solidify their ranks on the inside and also enforce their rules on the outside. In fact, it's said that one cannot survive in this prison if they're not a member of the Barrio 18. Aside from gang members and leaders who use their time in prison to develop a new criminal system and terrorize fellow inmates, there are also prison guards, police, and military who regularly harass inmates, along with the family members who come to visit. Similar to the Cojutepeque prison, inmates in this next facility also suffer from serious overcrowding. Ilopango Prison. Ilopango Prison is known for housing female gang members and the Los 17 women. These are women suffering over 30-year sentences because of abortion. Since 1998, El Salvador has banned all abortions and strictly prohibits it, even if a pregnancy threatens the mother's life. Recently, it has become much more severe as even miscarriage is now suspected to be an abortion or murder, with several women behind bars because of miscarriage. Ilopango Prison is where many of these women are jailed, and according to reports, the living conditions here are quite severe. In a previous article, journalist Miri Kutaniemi revealed how this facility that's meant to contain only 220 inmates now houses about 10 times that number. Inmates often face shortages of essential supplies such as food, hygiene products, and medical care. These items are often only available through family visits or communal sharing among inmates, leaving many women without basic necessities. There's also a lack of adequate infrastructure, which means that sanitation is poor and access to clean water is limited. Testimonies from former inmates reveal patterns of harassment by prison officials. Many women have reported being subjected to harsh interrogation methods just to force confessions of gang affiliations. Some have even recounted witnessing or experiencing physical violence that resulted in severe injuries or even death. There are also reports of innocent people being taken against their will and forced to endure hardship in this prison for a significant period of time. Although the living conditions at Ilopango Prison have caused a lot of tension and uprising, things have taken a rather surprising turn at this next facility. San Francisco Gotera Prison. The San Francisco Gotera Prison is yet another facility where inmates suffer serious overcrowding. Reporters who have visited the facility have disclosed how the prison has 1,600 inmates housed in a prison that's designed to hold just 200. Inmates are packed in cells with little or no room for comfort. Although this facility was originally built to house regular criminals, it was later repurposed to hold MS-13 gang members, and this has led to serious tensions within the prison. However, recently things have taken a very interesting turn at the San Francisco Gotera Gotera prison, as many inmates have surprisingly taken up Christianity. It all started when a small Bible study was initiated in the prison in 2015. In the early days of the movement, it was reported that only a few inmates attended the studies, but with time, the community grew as more inmates began to join. Although the inmates claim that they have abandoned gang life, many still admit that authorities have refused to believe their recent decision to turn a new leaf. While tension amongst inmates at Gotera prison has reportedly died down in these past years, the problem continues to persist in this next facility. Tanakata Peak Prison. The Tanakata Peak prison is often used to hold lower-ranking gang members of both the MS-13 and Barrio 18. Although it was originally designed to hold far fewer inmates than it currently houses, the government's aggressive anti-gang measures have flooded the prison system with thousands of inmates, many of whom are arrested without any formal charges or trials. Since the facility houses inmates from the MS-13 and Barrio 18 gangs, the rivalry within the prison wall is usually intense. Clashes between rival factions, as well as internal disciplinary measures imposed by gang leaders, have all resulted in frequent attacks and even death of inmates. Usually guards have limited control over what happens inside the prison, so this allows gangs to operate with relative autonomy. The living conditions here are also terrible, as basic needs such as food, water, and medical care are often insufficient. Medical care is almost non-existent, and this has led to the spread of diseases within the facility. Recently, a picture released by the media showed how the prison bars are extremely small, allowing only a little ventilation into the cells. A 16-year-old inmate, Carlos, has previously shared his shocking experience at the prison. The young inmate, who grew up in the street without any care from their parents, narrated how he ended up with gang members and lived a life of crime. The 16-year-old, serving a 7-year sentence for murder, spoke quietly with the interviewer, his feet bare, cut and bruised from the harsh concrete floor of the Tanakata Peck prison. Just like the harsh living conditions at Tanakata Peck prison continue to persist, authorities have also reported something similar at this next prison. Sonsonate Prison. The Sonsonate prison is mainly reserved for retired gang members, but like many other prisons in El Salvador, it also faces severe challenges that make it a dangerous place for inmates. Overcrowding is one of the primary issues at the prison, with facilities housing far more inmates than their intended capacity. There is also the issue of violence among inmates, many of whom are gang members from rival factions like the MS-13 and Barrio 18. Although many of the inmates here are retired, their influence still remains strong, even while they're behind bars. Rodolfo Garay, who is the Director General of Penitentiary Centers, has once lamented about how there are constant attacks by inmates who are gang leaders. These men rain terror on other inmates, causing severe harm in several cases. Since prison staff have limited control over internal affairs, inmates essentially run parts of the facility, thereby creating a lawless environment where attacks and murders occur frequently. There have also been reports of physical abuse and torture by prison staff. Although these actions are used as a method of control or punishment, they often lead to severe injuries and death. A similar thing is also happening in this next El Salvador prison. La Esperanza Prison. This is considered one of the largest prisons in El Salvador, holding about 4,700 inmates. Recently, photos from the prison were released by the media, showing the inhumane nature of this facility. Inmates are forced to sleep in overcrowded prison rooms. About 132 men have been reported to sleep in a room with fewer than 50 beds, and these beds are strictly for inmates who have gained significant influence in their cells. To get a bed, most inmates have to wait for up to 3 years, so newer inmates sleep wherever they can find a patch, often sharing the floor with cockroaches and rats. To get water, hundreds of inmates wait in line with buckets to collect water for bathing and washing clothes. According to reports, the prison receives water only 2 or 3 times a week, so inmates have to struggle to get water whenever it's available. And after getting water, they bathe openly in the prison courtyard. Since soap is not made available to them by the prison authority, many inmates have to purchase these using money they receive from visiting family members. Some are also able to raise funds selling items that they make inside the prison. For instance, some inmates use ropes to make fishing nets, hammocks, and baskets, which are then sold to raise money to purchase products such as soap, cigarettes, and food to compensate for what they don't receive from the prison authority. Just like the La Esperanza prison, inmates are also suffering serious inhumane treatment in this next prison we're about to explore. San Miguel Prison. The Centro Penitenciario de San Miguel is a prison located in the city of San Miguel, El Salvador. It's one of the country's penitentiary facilities, housing a significant number of inmates. And like many prisons in El Salvador, it is known for its harsh conditions, overcrowding, and gang violence. Initially, the facility housed both male and female inmates. However, in 2019, female inmates were relocated as part of a broader prison reorganization, leaving only male inmates in the facility. Out of the total inmates that were moved, 148 were taken to the Izalco Minor Detention Center, 62 to the Ilopango Penitentiary Center, and 12 people to the Izalco Women's Farm. However, despite the relocation, the living conditions here are still very harsh. On several occasions, inmates have reported unsanitary living conditions and a lack of basic hygiene facilities. Recently, a prison official, Raquel Caballero, described how facilities like this are sometimes plagued with disease outbreaks which are left untreated by authorities. Inmates are often denied medication despite showing serious symptoms of illnesses. Just as inmate separations significantly reduced the cases of molestation at San Miguel Prison, this next facility also took a similar approach. Sensuntepec Prison. Sensuntepec Prison is widely known for overcrowding, inhumane treatment, gang dominance, and the deadly environment that inmates are forced to live in. There are constant reports of attacks, violence, and even molestation, all owing to the vulnerable positions that inmates find themselves. In a previous interview, ex-inmate Carla Avalar narrated how there are incidents of molestation at the facility on a daily basis. Avalar was one of the many trans sex workers from San Salvador who has done prison time at the facility over the past decades. According to her, she was regularly molested and tortured during her time at the prison, which was between 1996 and 2000. Avalar also revealed how she was harassed and forced into mini-slavery by the guards who controlled the prison. Another ex-inmate, Kendra, also shared a similar story, recalling how she was subjected to verbal harassment when she first arrived at the facility in 2010. She stated that a guard forced her to kneel for 2 hours while hurling homophobic insults at her. Although a lot of these incidents happened during the period when Avalar and Kendra were at the prison, new policies have been made afterward to move trans gang members out of the prison, and this was done to reduce the incidence of harassment and molestation that had been recorded in the past. Although efforts have been made to reduce inmate hardship at the Sensuntepec Prison, the story is largely different at this next facility. La Union Prison. This is a smaller facility for housing younger gang members. However, despite being a juvenile detention center, there are still incidents of violence. In a previous interview, ex-detainees at the prison revealed how inmates are denied access to open air. They spoke about conditions like overcrowding, where some cells hold up to 100 inmates. There's also poor access to basic needs such as food, water, and medical care, with authorities rationing these basic necessities. In addition to many of these claims, there were likewise reports of verbal and physical harassment by the police and prison guards. Some of these guards have reportedly used pepper sprays on inmates in the cells. They have also prevented some inmates from communicating with their families. This goes to show the severity of treatments that are given to inmates at these facilities. In a previous statement in July, Zaira Navas, who is a lawyer overseeing many of these cases, noted that a lot of people have died in El Salvador prisons, mainly because of torture, lack of food, unhealthy living conditions, and the inhumane treatment that they receive. Under the state of emergency, the El Salvadoran government has significantly suspended certain constitutional rights, allowing mass arrest and the detention of suspected gang members. However, a lot of people have argued that while this policy has reduced violence in El Salvador, it has also turned prisons into centers for human rights violations and inhumane treatment. But what do you think? Should this policy be upheld, or should it be abolished from El Salvadorian communities? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, then be sure to click on this next card on your screen.